Melissa, welcome to Grow Your Show. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Are you kidding me? You have 3 million downloads. That's freaking awesome. Am I right? Is that right?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
insane. That's incredible. How long have you been, when did you launch the podcast? And it's called Mind Love, right?
Yeah, almost exactly 3 years ago. It was December 2nd, 2017.
Well, you remember the actual date. That's impressive.
Of course, it was this big event for me. I was like, oh my gosh, my launch date's coming up. My launch date's coming up. So I
Wow.
remember.
Amazing. Do you remember what you did on your launch date?
Yes, I made it an event for me. And it's funny because I took a course to help launch my show. I realized a while ago that it's just really helpful to take a course. I used to be the type of person that wanted to find all the information for free because it's out there and I'm good at
Yeah.
research. But the problem is I can research my way into every single avenue and then I have too many options in my head. So I needed to narrow it down. So
Yeah.
in this course, it was by Pat Flynn and he actually encouraged you to make it like a launch event. So invite your Facebook friends, do a virtual event, whatever. What I found from doing that is I do not believe that that helped me downloads at all, but it did really create it as an event for me. It got my excitement up. It was a hard deadline that I needed to launch at this date because I was already talking about it. So I couldn't talk myself out of it. And it built the momentum for me to start sharing about my show candidly, because what I found is a ton of people launch their podcast and they are too embarrassed to like let people know about it. They want to
Yeah.
have the success first, but you really have to get out there and be like, I have a podcast. I have a podcast. Leave me a review. And I did that with every single person that I knew. And so I set up a booth in my co-working space. And it was funny because there was a bunch of LA fires that day. And so it was really smoky out. So what I
Right.
did is I went to the nearest CVS and bought out all of the smoke masks, which are
Oh,
actually
man.
coming in really handy right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still had like a surplus of masks around.
That's so
And
fun.
I set up in a booth and I posted on the WeWork network free smoke masks on floor 2. And every time somebody came, I had printed out just these little makeshift cards with like the name of my podcast on it. And every time somebody would come, I'd give them a mask and I'd be like, I just launched a podcast. I'd really appreciate a 5-star review.
I
So
love
I
that.
didn't get a lot of downloads, but I did actually get my first few handfuls of reviews that day.
I really love the hustle. I love it because it's funny. When I started my podcast, it was about 4 years ago. I don't know the exact date, but I do remember I went to I think it was a bar mitzvah or something like that. A bar mitzvah is a Jewish celebration. I think most people know what a bar mitzvah is, right? These days.
Yeah.
So I was at this bar mitzvah and I feel so embarrassed to say this, but I went up to people and I said, hey, can I borrow your phone for a minute? And they're like, sure. What for? I'm like, I'm just going to subscribe to my podcast. I just launched it this week. And they're like, okay, what's a podcast? I'm like, that doesn't matter. Just, you can listen to it if you want. But because what I understood, and I think it's still today, the way that iTunes ranks podcasts is based on how many subscribers you have. Like that's, I think, the number one. Correct me if I'm wrong. You've got the 3 million downloads here, right? So I think that's how they did it. But either way, I was like grabbing people's phones and basically just saying, do you mind if I subscribe to my show? And that's how I started. That's how it started off. Today, I'm a little bit more, what's the word? Tactful, right? But still, it's in a way, there's got to be, like you said, I love that. There's got to be a no shame game, right? So we just launched Grow Your Show. And I've just been posting on Facebook and reaching out to people saying, hey, can you subscribe and rate the show? And I know some people I'm going to piss off a little bit. Like they're going to be like, Daniel, for flip's sake, all I see now on my feed is this Grow Your Show, Grow Your, okay, enough already. But you just got to do it, right? That's your success,
Yeah.
right?
Well, for sure. And there's 3 things that I want to comment on from what you just said. First of all, what I found when I was sharing on Facebook, because I also noticed I had other friends. I live in LA. There's a lot of entrepreneurs. And
Yeah.
I noticed as somebody has a background in marketing, whenever I take an action, I like to stop and think, why did I take an action on that, whereas I might not have before? And one thing that I realized was that if somebody's posting like, oh my gosh, I just did this interview or a new podcast up, I'd almost be irritated. Like, okay, why? Like, thanks for spamming my feed. I think I might mute you now.
Right.
But if they started posting, I just reached 1,000 downloads in my first month, this is in the top whatever percentile, then I'm
Yeah.
wondering, it's more of the social validation. So why is this one doing better? This one must be good. What are they doing differently? And so instead of sharing my podcast episodes, which I did do a few times, I started sharing my successes and my excitement. And a lot of times you have to dig for those in the beginning.
Yeah.
But not only does that get other people intrigued, it also keeps your motivation up. So that's the first thing I wanted to comment on.
By the way, we on that point, we just hit the top 200 in marketing. So I'm really excited. It's crazy. Like,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
We have a really good name too. So it's a very searchable name. Well, but
I wanted to ask you a question on that point, because some people might be listening to this going, yeah, but there are people who, when you share your successes, they kind of go, you're so egotistical. Like, you're such a show off. Like, okay, wow. Okay. You want a medal. Okay. So you hit the top 200, you want a prize. The
only people that are going to criticize your successes are the people that are doing less than you. Those are the people that you do not worry about at all. It does not matter what they think about you. So again, I think that's a lot of what entrepreneurship is getting outside of what you think other people are going to do or how other people are going to react, because the way they're reacting to you is the same exact way that they're reacting to their own life. And so their inability to put themselves out there is because they doubt themselves. So they're going to do that. They're going to project that onto other people as well. You don't want to get caught into that mindset. So it's just best to ignore those people in general.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, I had a neighbor of mine who lived on my street, and I was walking down the street one day, and he goes, I just want to let you know I blocked you on Facebook. And I was like, okay, what? Why? And I'm thinking maybe I posted something, but I don't post anything political or anything bad. So I was trying to figure it out. So I turned around, I said to him, why? And he said, you're just too positive. Everything you post is like, wow, everything's amazing. Everything's amazing. So I just couldn't stand it. So I blocked you. And I was like, wow, oh God bless this guy. He should only be well and only have good things, because he must be in a pretty bad place to, can't please
to not only block you, but to also
tell me,
feel it's appropriate to tell you about it later.
Right.
Well, before I started my podcast, I actually worked in the app industry for years. And I worked for a company that had an app called Free App a Day. And not only did we have our own app that we were constantly boosting to the top of the charts, but we also helped market thousands of other apps. So I got this really in-depth view of how Apple ranks things. And I decided, I bet this is going to be very similar to how the podcast app store works. And so you mentioned your number of subscribers is going to be one of the biggest drivers, and it is. However, there's more things that go into the algorithm. So a lot of people look at their number of downloads, but if you have 10,000 downloads and 9,000 subscribers, it shows that that's a really high subscriber to download ratio that Apple can see. You can't necessarily see that. But if you have 1,000 subscribers and 10,000 downloads, it might actually be negative in the algorithm because it's showing that 90% of the people are not willing to commit to this show. Another thing that matters is the length of listening time, the number of reviews, the frequency of reviews will give you a little bit of a boost. So maybe suddenly you only have 20 reviews, but then all of a sudden you get 50 in a weekend. But then somebody else has 400 reviews. You're probably going to get a bigger boost than that other person that has more reviews than you, but you got yours all at once. So the algorithm's going to be triggered like maybe they had a good episode coming up. So there's a lot more that goes into that algorithm. And I have always tried to play on those parts of it to see if it would boost it. And it did work. I got into the top 100 of all podcasts within my first 6 months.
That's incredible.
It didn't stay there, but it was a really cool milestone.
Yeah. So besides for the subscribers and then the reviews, and actually before we go into what else you could do to play with the algorithm, someone listening to this who's started a podcast already and they kind of feel like they missed the launch boat, that whole like launch thing, they just didn't do it. And now they feel like, oh man, I've missed the boat. what would you say? Is there a way they could still, win the game, so to speak, and get massive downloads, even if they didn't have a big launch day?
100%, because like I said, I don't think that launch date helped my algorithm or my listenership at all. It was really to build the momentum within myself. And there's something to be said about the way your brain works, the reticular activating system. So if I'm going out there telling everybody and I'm like, this is going to be a big show, my brain starts to, in the background, look for the opportunities. However, if I have an internal conflict with myself and I'm like, I don't really want people to listen yet, I don't feel confident in it, your brain's going to be looking for evidence for that, and it's going to be harder to build that momentum and really feel confident about putting yourself out there. So I think that big launch date was more for me than for anything else, and it helped me to spot opportunities that would actually help.
I love the fact that you had a giving mindset. So you didn't just, in your co-working space, just tell everybody, hey, can you do me a favor and subscribe and review my podcast? You went out and bought gas masks because it was a smoky day, which was really, first of all, genius creativity there, but also just thinking about giving to people and using the laws of reciprocity. Whereas with me, I was kind of just like, hey, can I borrow your phone and do this? So embarrassing moment. But
I did that too.
That's good to know. Thank you. So I really love that. So for people listening, what are some other ways that they could get reviews without sort of just shamelessly asking for it? And what other ways can you sort of give in order to get the reviews?
I started with my inner circle and anyone that was around me in person, because it really, leaving reviews isn't always easy, especially if you don't have an iTunes ID. So in the beginning, I don't know if it's still this way, but people would go and try and they'd be like, it won't even work. And apparently you needed to create a username that was so unique, but it wouldn't tell you that. So it was just rejecting them. So at that point I would be like, here, I'll help you out. And I'd take their phone. That was the easiest thing that had the lowest barrier to entry. When I started to get even just a few listeners, I started to push one call to action in my podcast. I didn't have an email list yet. I have always thought about what do I want them to do and how can I reduce that friction or somehow add social validation or excitement about it. So right now I've been actually getting a lot more reviews again because I will change my call to action at given time. So instead of being like, leave a review and subscribe to my email list, and I have a new course coming out, I'll be like, well, this month I'm focusing on pushing this course. This month I'm focusing on this. And so right now what I'm doing is I'm reading people's reviews on my show in the beginning so they're not skipping through it. And I'm like, and I make it fun and personal so that it stands out. And one of the things I say is like, please leave me a review. It will make me love you more. That's just my personality. And it's funny because I just had a coaching call with somebody and she's like, and it was my first coaching call with her. And she's like, I've been meaning to leave your review because it will make you love me more. And people like that stuff. If it shows your personality. And then I'm like, this is my latest review that I'm so grateful to receive. And I meet it with gratitude, not with an expectation. I really, that's what my show is all about. It's the energy that you put out there will be the energy that comes back to you. So that's been a huge driver of my reviews lately. When I started doing that, I started getting about probably like 20x the reviews. There was like a good month that I got one review because I wasn't pushing it, even though my show does have a pretty big listener base. So
you have to
again, if that's the intention and you're constantly reminding people at the beginning and the end of the show, then it does make it easier.
I tell people if they leave me a review, I'll do a happy dance and record myself and send it to them, like a little funny dance. Yeah. So if you're listening to this, I'm going to do that now. If anyone's listening to this, leave me a review, take a screenshot, send it to me, and I'll send you my little funny happy dance for you. Was there a tipping point in your downloads? Was there a point where you kind of went from kind of slowly growing to suddenly there was a huge spike at all in your journey?
Yes. I had a plan when I launched. So I was really trying to think of, I would Google how to grow your show, and then I'd read everything, and then I'd be like, okay, now what's the one thing I can think of that is not in this list? And I would focus on that. Because a lot of the answers that I found online were all just regurgitated. And honestly, a lot of them didn't work really well. There are ways to kind of incrementally grow, but they weren't big drivers. And so I started to think, at that point, Apple wasn't even updating their iTunes new and noteworthy or anything. The ones that were new and noteworthy were like a year and a half old. So I started to think, where else are people getting their podcasts? And can I be featured there? So I started to download every single third-party podcast app and look for the ones that had their own featured section. And then I made a point to start building relationships with those people. And so I would join their Facebook groups and add a ton of value in their Facebook groups for a while until my name would be known. And then I would reach out to the admin and ask who to talk to that was in their marketing department. And then I would ask to be featured. And so in order to do this, though, because I was a brand new show, why would they feature a brand new show? Like if I had an app, I honestly wouldn't, unless there was something really different about it. So I created a 20 episode plan where I did really heavy editing, and it took me a long time. It took me about 8 hours per episode, and it wouldn't have been sustainable if I knew it was going to go forever. Well, first of all, I was also just getting used to editing, so it was going to take me longer anyways.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people I was getting weren't professionals because I was new. So I would spend a lot of time editing what they said to, if they rambled or if they were skipping all over the stories, I'd put the story in order. And I would add sound effects when they would tell certain things. So there was this one episode, for example, this woman was talking about kind of leaving the house with her abusive boyfriend and throwing the keys on the table and starting the car. And I had sound effects for all of this in the background.
Wow.
So
I love
when
that.
I would pitch my show, I would say my show's really different. It's a unique spin, one that does not exist in the mindfulness space. So I found something completely unique to my own.
Brilliant.
And that's important because if you're launching a true crime podcast, there's plenty that already do that. So you've got to figure out something that makes yours different in your category. And so people would listen to it. I'd give them the exact timestamps and they're like, wow, this is really good. And I got featured in Castbox and Overcast. I got featured in Spotify. And all of a sudden that's when it spiked my downloads.
That's so smart. Everyone's kind of doing what everyone's doing, and that's why they're getting the same results. But when you get creative and do things differently, that's when you see results. And for me, it's funny because in my previous podcast, Can I Pick Your Brain? You're going to laugh. I started rapping the intro for the guests. Now I'm a white Jewish boy. I should not be rapping, but I just wanted to be different. I needed to do something different. And you know what? Every single guest, I did it for about, I think it was 30 or 40 episodes until I just kind of, it just got too much. But every single guest they were like, oh my God, that was the best intro I've ever had. And these are people who have been on like hundreds of podcasts. So they were sharing it just because of the rap. Hopefully the episode was good as well, but they were sharing it because of the rap. That's the thing. Like, and these are guys who wouldn't necessarily share it because they've been on so many. Like, you're not going to share every podcast you've been on. So if you do something different, something unique, then people are going to, are more likely to share it as well. I love that. It's brilliant. So what gave you the kind of idea to start a podcast? Like, why did you want to start one in the first place?
I started to get really intentional about what was going to give me purpose and meaning. So I had been studying entrepreneurship for years. And what ended up happening is I kept getting sucked into different startups in the marketing department because I had a background in this knowledge. And I just started learning online. I actually ended up winning when I first started learning digital marketing, I won this contest to go to the Traffic and Conversion Summit, which is still one of the biggest ones to this day. I ended up winning a contest at the end called the Wicked Smart Competition, which set up my freelance career for 2 years, which was really awesome. And so I was really interested in marketing, but I was chasing the opportunities instead of what was right for me. So I started a travel blog for a while, and then I realized I don't want to be at the top of Machu Picchu telling people where to go next. I want to be like in the moment. This is my escape. Yeah. I started an e-commerce website about gifts for teen boys. And then I realized I don't even think I like teen boys, but the direct domain was available and it has buyer's intent in the keywords. And so I just was doing
What was the number one gift that teen boys wanted in those days?
Well, I actually was using the Facebook search algorithm at that time when
Dare
they
I
used to have the
ask?
open graph open, and I would search for what 13-year-olds were most looking for. So I had this whole scientifically
Can I
calibrated.
guess? PlayStation?
uh, I don't even remember. This was
Oh,
like a
okay,
long
fine.
time ago.
All right.
But the website's still up. Just go to givesforteenboys.com.
No, I don't need to. I have Teen Boy. I mean, I have one almost teen boy, and all he wants is PlayStation and Fortnite. So I kind of,
It's quite outdated.
yeah,
But then I was just not fulfilled, and I was still working for a company. My boss was kind of toxic, and I knew I needed to do something else. And so I went back to all of the purpose finding activities. So I started to find my core values. I started to write what I had been good at in the past, what my skills are, what lights me up, what drains my energy. And then one thing that was really helpful is I wrote a letter to 11 different people, and I asked if I had a superpower, what would it be? And I did this in a way because that's an embarrassing thing to say. And I had
yeah,
gotten this same task in an entrepreneurship course before, but I decided I was just going to be bold with it. And I wrote like, I'm taking an entrepreneurship course. This is an assignment. If you could please write like what you think I'm good at. That way it kind of took the pressure off me a little bit.
yeah.
And I got amazing responses, and it was really enlightening that people from all different areas of my life, from my mom to an old roommate to somebody at my co-working space to an old coworker, they all basically said that I'm good at taking information from tons of areas and delivering it in a way that people understand. And so all of a sudden I'm like, oh, maybe I do need to share the things I'm learning. And then that combined with what I'm endlessly curious about. I was always reading books about mindset and the power of the mind and spirituality. So I started to narrow it down to that. But then when it came to the medium of which I was going to do this, I always get stuck on writing. It's like I'll get in
Yeah,
the writing
mental
hole,
block.
like
Yeah.
procrastinate forever. And with video, I can almost always talk myself out of being on video because I put on makeup like once a month. And so I was like, a podcast is
I
perfect
also
for
put on
that.
makeup once a month, but no, I'm just kidding.
I know. And 2 days later, Pat Flynn sent out an email that he was launching his first podcasting course, and I had been
Right.
following him for a while. And so everything kind of just came together really well.
Awesome. I love that story. That's brilliant. And have you monetized the podcast?
Yeah, I make a good amount of money in sponsorships per month at this point.
Yeah.
And I also have a digital course that I launch every now and then. I have a membership site. So I launch twice as many episodes via a private feed using Supercast. So people can import it straight to their favorite podcast player for an extra amount. And then there's an additional tier on that where they get calls with me. I also do coaching and podcast consulting to help people grow their show.
You make more money from your own products than selling other people's products on your podcast?
I don't sell other people's products on my pod. Well,
Your
other than
sponsorship.
sponsorships, but
That's what I mean. Yeah.
it depends. I've there's definitely way more potential when you're selling your own products.
Right.
But there have been times where, like right now, I am pregnant. And so I'm
Oh,
like,
congratulations.
I'm kind of easing out of launches right now, and the sponsorships are enough to pay the bills.
It's amazing.
But
Wow.
again, the digital products are a real game changer, especially if you have a smaller listenership, because even when your show is smaller, they tend to be very loyal. And that's when most people start making their money. I just happen to be the other way because of the surge in downloads. And I started with sponsorships before my own digital product.
Love it. So just before we wrap up, we mentioned iTunes algorithm hacks. So obviously subscribers is an obvious one, reviews. What was some of the other ones that you wanted to share?
Some of the other ones are basically how long they're listening to your show. So that percentage. And so I think about the things that add intrigue. So for example, in the beginning, I say 3 things you will learn in this episode. And a lot of times that keeps people around to hear the third thing.
Smart. You keep cliffhanger. I like that.
Yeah. I put a teaser in the very first minute of the episode.
Something's crazy is going to happen at the end of this episode, by the way. So just stay tuned. I don't know what it is, but something crazy is going to happen.
And so I'll put a teaser in the beginning of the episode, and I'll pick it from something that happens in the last 30% of the episode. A lot of times people will wait around for that.
Nice.
If I'm going to a commercial break, I will often ask a question and go to a commercial break before they answer it. So they're waiting to get that answer.
Love
And
that.
often I'll also say, stick around to the end because I'm sharing blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of different ways that you can come up with to get people to stick around longer in your show.
Sweet.
And then the other things are just reducing the friction of whatever you want to do. Make it easy. If you start to have an email list, which is really helpful to remind people to come back to your show, I think of, well, most people are on their phones. A lot of people are driving. So I have a text to sign up using a program called Textiful. So you can just text.
What's that called? Textiful?
Textiful. And
Textiful. Okay.
and make it appealing. I give away free gifts when people sign up for my email list. My email list isn't a newsletter. It's called the Morning Mind Love, which starts the day with a short paragraph of inspiration to start your day on the right note with a positive mindset. So it's not like I'm trying to sell them this. It's like, hey,
Right.
I'm going to give this to you. People want to sign up for this Morning Mind Love. So they just text morning to 33777. And that's so much easier for a lot of people than having to go to a form and whatever. And so with this, then you can constantly be cycling people back. And so it's just trying to keep people in your podcast and keep people coming back to it are the biggest tricks.
Love it. So for those listening, go subscribe to Mind Love. Melissa's got so many gems. I mean, we could be here for days. I'm loving this. Maybe we'll do another part. Thank you so much, Melissa. Is there any way that the listeners can get in touch with you? Is there anything that you're sort of promoting right now that you want to share?
Sure. Well, what I feel like would be most relevant for this is if you want to shoot me an email, melissa@mindlove.com. If you're interested in any sort of podcast consultation, I do 1-hour sessions to help create a strategy or give tips on everything from growth strategies, the structure of your show, how to get really good guests, which I also could talk for about an hour on, and all of that good stuff, and get people to share your episode to spread it more with word of mouth. So if you need any help from me, just send me an email at melissa@mindlove.com.
Love it. Melissa, thank you so much for being on Grow Your Show, and happy podcasting.
Thank you.